joining us?
Is China joining us?
As far as I'm aware.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Asked you or Jeff, are we missing someone? I think that we are still missing China, but from
China yet. Waiting for Rich and Amajid.
Just joined. Margie just joined.
Amajid, hello, how are you?
Hello.
Also Hector and Rania.
So we will wait, and we have the PIOB. Hello, Janine.
Yes.
Good to see you again. Let's wait 1 minute and see if they join. Otherwise, let's start. Okay.
So Rich is in, and Vanya is off camera. Jeff.
Rania, not Vanya.
Sorry, Vanya is off camera.
Yes, yeah.
So Hector is connecting, as I can see. Hello.
Hi, Hector.
Okay. I think we should probably make a start.
Okay. Yes, we have quorum, Gabriella, so we can make a start.
Yeah, I think that we are just missing Chana and Rania.
That's right.
Right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so I'll make a start with a few introductory words. I don't want to take a lot of time, but this will give time for the missing ones to join and not miss the most important part of the meeting, which is the discussion that we will hold over the next few hours. First of all, thank you very much. It's very good to see you again. It looks as if we were together yesterday, and it's hard to believe that so much happened and has been developing over these last few weeks since we met for the last time in New York. Thank you very much for making the time. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. And I also would like to greet the ones who may be observing us online. I don't know if it's the case, but this meeting is being live streamed, so there may be some external observers that I'd like to greet as well and thank them for the interest if it's the case in this meeting. I'd like to warn you that this meeting is being recorded. You must have received a message when connecting to Zoom, but anyway, I'd like to make sure that everyone is aware that since you join, this meeting is being recorded and it's being provided or sent to external observers as well, and I assume that you are all comfortable with that. So the purpose of this, thank you very much for your time. We know that it's Friday and you're all very busy, but we all agree that this meeting would be critical to make us achieve the objectives and the deadline, the timelines that we promised and committed to. The objective of this meeting, as you know, is it has only one item, and this item is to review or consider or discuss the proposed changes to two sections of the IESBA, of the International Independent Standards and the Ethics and Independent Standards for Sustainability Assurance. And these sections are the section 5405 and 5406, respectively, on group sustainability assurance engagements and another practitioner whose sustainability information is used in a sustainability assurance engagement. So the idea and the purpose of this meeting is that before the December board meeting, where we are supposed to finalize the standards and submit them for approval by the board, to try to overcome or still progress and close these two topics, which were subject to more substantial discussions and on which the task force has been doing a lot of work over the last weeks. And with this and here, I'd like to thank the task force as well and the staff for the hectic pace of work that they have been ensuring to make sure that this meeting would be useful and that the board would be provided with the necessary and substantial material to be able to consider appropriately these developments and these adjustments. Thank you, Mark, and the whole task force and the staff for that. So we also have the experts project, of course, see what developed since the last September meeting on the basis of the discussions that we held there and some further outreach. So these are the topics that we will address today. The plan is that we take around 1 hour and a half for sustainability and 1 hour more or less for experts with a 15 minutes break between the two sessions to allow us to stretch our legs and refresh a little bit. Let's see how the discussion goes. Hopefully we will be able to be shorter than this, but if necessary, we can also extend a little bit if the discussion takes us further than that. So I was telling you that the work since September has been hectic, but I'd also like to tell you that alongside the work that the task force has been doing, this work has been is being informed by a lot of outreach that we have been undertaking since then. The discussions in September were very substantial and I'd say very promising in terms of the success of the project. But until the last minute, we are undertaking outreach, listening to stakeholders, discussing, receiving feedback, inputs, etc. And the work that the task force will show you today reflects, or the task forces, better said, on sustainability and experts will show today to the board, reflect this outreach and these reflections upon the September's discussions. Just so as you know, since the last board meeting, which happened like 1 month ago, 4 weeks ago, we had discussions on these topics with the PIOB on the week after the board meeting or 2 weeks after the board meeting. We had discussions with the CEAOB. We had discussions with Accountancy Europe in Brussels and some stakeholders there. We had discussions with the SAC, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee Council, in New York. So the PIOB met in Madrid, the CIOB took us to Crete, Brussels, New York. And this week, we had the Stakeholder Advisory Committee meeting on Monday and Tuesday. Mark and Sylvia were in Paris to attend the Forum of Firms meeting, where they also held some discussions with the Forum of Firms participants on the proposals being advanced. And I had the opportunity to participate at the IFAC Council, where the subject was sustainability and the sustainability standards. So, on top of all this, a slightly different topic, which was a meeting with the United Nations Development Program, about which I will have the opportunity to tell you more, but just to tell you that this was a very interesting symposium in preparation of the 2025 big conference on financing for development, and where our projects on sustainability, tax planning, and farm culture and governance became relevant and very consistent in maybe contributing to the United Nations Development Program plans for the next global financial architecture. So this all happened in 4 weeks. I'm sure that I'm missing something, namely on the expert side, but Laurie will have the opportunity to tell you. I have been connecting with some board members as well over these 4 weeks, namely with Mark and Laurie. So this has been a very, very intense period for us. And the purpose of this meeting, I hope that all this work and all this openness to our stakeholders and to conversations, dialogue, discussions, etc., has been extremely helpful for the proposals that you will be discussing today, and extremely helpful to help us achieve the objective of 2024 approval. Just the last word on this. I had the opportunity to send you an email, but I will just clarify for the sake of full transparency and understanding that the PIOB confirmed 3 weeks ago that the date of the certification of the standard will be January 2025, 16 January 2025. On the IESBA side, there was an anticipation of the date of the certification, which had been set up for the 19th of December and is now set for the 12th of November. So these are the next relevant and important timelines for both standards. It's not indifferent for us, and that's what we should be expecting and dealing with. So without anything else on my side, and because this meeting is supposed to be a discussion on the subject about everything, I'd like to, give the floor, I think, to Mark, not before asking Ken or the staff if I am missing something, if there is anything that I should warn the board or inform the board that I'm missing. Ken, anything from your side?
I think it's just to acknowledge that we have Janine Van Dikelen observing on behalf of the PIOB.
Yes, Ken, thank you very much. I had already greeted Janine at the start, but probably before the hour. So thank you very much for highlighting that. Welcome, Janine, once again to the meeting. And of course, it's essential that the PIOB is here. So that's why I made sure that before we started, we had the PIOB present in the meeting. Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Janine. And Mark, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for the work time.
Thank you, Gabriella. Afternoon, everyone. We've got some slides just to run through, which really set out the sort of key things that the task force has been doing since we had the last board meeting. So this is very much responding to the discussions that we had in September. So the discussion will largely be framed around two sections of the code, 5405 and 5406, that we discussed in September, and we'd also made changes to, so we were aligned with proposals in the finalised version of the IESB's ISSA 5000. If we can go on to the next slide, please. You'll see that there are broadly 6 things that we propose to cover. Firstly, just going through the determination of group component and value chain component, building on the discussion that the board had in September. A clearer description in response to feedback from the board about a group sustainability assurance engagement, because we were asked if we could provide greater clarity to that. Everyone's favourite subject, additional application guidance on what do we actually mean by performing assurance work at. So there's some new application material that the task force discussed in Paris. We've restructured the independence requirements applicable to the value chain components, and that's in a sense tried to make the section 5405 an easier and clearer one to use by brigading the requirements for a value chain component all together, rather than having them split around. There's additional application guidance where there are changes in value chain components that are part of the engagement, and also changes in the component practitioner who might perform assurance work at a value chain component. And then the last issue is going to be clarification of obtaining confirmations of another practitioner's independence in accordance with Part 5. So hopefully those will be the key areas that everyone was expecting. I should say as I go through, if there's something that I miss, Sylvia, please feel free to jump in. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. Firstly, there's a revised paragraph of application material, and this is responding to feedback from the board about what is actually a group sustainability assurance engagement. So if I pause for a moment to just let you read the wording on the screen, it's predicated around the every sustainability assurance engagement involving either group component or value chain component is a group engagement. And this also, this description also fully aligns with what's in ISSA 5000 with respect to group sustainability information, and also the definition of a group sustainability assurance engagement. So you'll see that what we've done is develop this application material that you see on the screen in front of you. Because there are only a small handful of slides, Gabriella, what I propose to do is go through to the end, and then we'll pause for discussion and any questions. So that's the revised description that has now been included within the draft text. If we can go on to the next slide, please. This issue we have discussed quite a lot, and we had some very useful discussions in Paris as well. People had said, picking up from our alignment with the IESBA, what was actually meant by performing assurance work at a component. So what we've done is we've leveraged the approach in the ETGA FAQs to actually provide some application material. And what we've also sought to do is recognise that there is a difference between the activities that might be performed at a component at the group level. So what is assurance work and what is other? And what we've now got is this application material which sets out the independence requirements. And of course, there's that linkage to the fact that what we're talking about is the practitioner performing procedures for the purposes of getting evidence for the group sustainability assurance engagement. And there's also that further clarification that for the engagement, the practitioner has determined it's necessary to perform assurance procedures on the underlying data or information that is used or forms part of the component sustainability information. So this is additional application material to address some of the feedback from the board in September. In terms of the next slide, we've also got the additional guidance regarding any changes in value chain components. You'll remember that a number of people had raised questions about the fact that the value chain itself is going to be potentially a constantly changing thing, and therefore what happens when you've got changes to value chain components that are included within the reporting. So what we've done within the guidance is effectively provided pointers to say it's analogous to what happens where you've got changes to a group component in a group audit scenario, and that itself draws on the guidance that's available within the Code for Mergers and Acquisitions as a basis. In doing so, we've of course based it on the application of the conceptual framework, so identify threats that are created by previous interests, and also included in the new paragraph at 540535 examples of those threats and safeguards and other ways to address them. So this is dealing with the feedback over what do you do where you've got to change. We were also asked about confirming the independence of another practitioner that you propose to use within your engagement. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. What we're looking to do here is where the firm intends to use assurance work of another practitioner, which has been performed at the firm's sustainability assurance client, what do you have to do? The firm has to request that that practitioner confirms that they satisfy the independence requirements in this part of the code, and also the individuals from the other practitioner who perform the assurance work satisfy the independence requirements in this part. And of course, we were asked to develop further text, which we put within 5406.5 as a way of clarifying how you go about obtaining that confirmation, which there was some confusion over, I think, earlier on. So effectively what we're asking for is a confirmation that the practitioner is independent in accordance with this part. Now, you can either do that by asking them directly or indeed confirming it on any sort of assurance report that they might have issued. So those are the substantive issues that we've talked about and that were discussed by the task force in Paris. We can go on to the next slide now, and I'll propose to pause there, Gabriella, and open up for questions or comments.
Sure, Mark. Thank you very much.
Did I miss anything, Sylvia?
No, you didn't miss anything, Mark.
Thank you, Sylvia and Mark. Let's now open for comments on these proposals or suggestions. Christelle, please.
Thank you. Hello to all. So first, I would like to thank Workstream 1 on the additional guidance that was now pushed into the draft for the meaning of performing assurance work at a component. I'm sorry, but I still struggle on the fundamental, which is that to address a situation that the Workstream 1 considers unlikely to be often available at a value chain entity outside the control or significant influence of the client, we still express some things that seems very large to address, that has effectively important consequence in terms of the organization that the sustainability assurance practitioner should put in place, and is meant to address some narrow not very frequent situations, but it is going to be precise outside of the code, the situations where it should be done. So in terms of understandability, scalability, and complexity, I wonder if we cannot put that on a reverse, saying, well, there might be self-review threats to be addressed by the practitioner, but in terms of independence, the situations where the issue of independence should be addressed and should rely on supportive systems is limited to this kind of situation where there is control or significant influence of the sustainability assurance client over the value chain entity. Because I think in terms of proportionality of the proposal, it would be better. It will also put into the code the situation which are not frequent but should be addressed. And it would also allow the sustainability assurance practitioner to organize their systems in order to address these situations. In prevention, when they prepare for comment on dit? When they are in competition to get the job, okay, of assurance, they need to have a lot of information. And what about the information about value chain entities, components, etc., and how they should address their potential threats to independence on that initial phase, and also, as we discussed a few times during our boards, on an ongoing way where there might be huge changes in a value chain transactions and situations, and which could not be addressed at the end, and would make the assurance provider struggle with issuing a report. So this was my main point. Sorry to have been a bit long.
No, thank you very much. And I think it's good that you suggest something alternative, which I think should always be the approach, mostly when we are at this stage of the process and of the project. So thank you, Christelle. Luigi, please.
Thank you, sorry. And thank you for the revised version of the draft code. I have some questions on matters that are arising, a number of doubts, and I would start with the clarification or the guidance on Perform Assurance Work Act, which created to me some doubts about the consistency with other part of this proposal. In the explanation, it is written that if the group sustainability assurance firm or component practitioner has determined that to obtain evidence for the purpose of the group sustainability assurance engagement, it is necessary to perform procedure on the underlying data and information, such group assurance firm need to be independent with respect to such components. So far, so good, but there is an issue, in my view, because when we go to the definition of component, the definition of component says, for a group sustainability assurance engagement, an entity, business unit, function, or business activity determined by the group sustainability assurance firm for the purpose of planning, performing the group sustainability assurance. So basically, the act to determine where to perform work constitute perform assurance work at. It is the reason for being independent. But this is what happens anytime that an auditor or an assurance service provider is planning to perform this assurance work. So basically, anytime this assurance service provider is identifying any component, whether a group component or a value chain component, on the basis of your explanation, it seems to me that you are concluding that this group sustainability assurance firm need to be independent from all components determined by this group sustainability assurance firm. So if it is the case, I frankly do not understand why you are developing all the scenario described in various flow chart, because at the end, it is an easy response. The group sustainability assurance firm is to be independent from all value chain component, for example. So my point is, can you clarify, also because I need to understand in order to understand whether I am in agreement or not, whether this is the case. So if the group sustainability assurance firm determine that to obtain evidence for the purpose of the group sustainability assurance engagement, it is necessary to perform work at a value chain component, whether or not this work is performed by the group sustainability assurance firm or by a third party, a component practitioner, or by another third party, another practitioner, is the group sustainability assurance firm performing work at this component and therefore is required to be independent? Because there is an inconsistency here that need to be clarified in the description of what constitute perform assurance work or in the code where you are discussing all the terms of independence. Thank you.
Thank you, Luigi. Mark, do you want to respond or comment on these two interventions now, or should I let?
Well, sure. Can I just pick up? Maybe one of the things that we need to do, Christelle, is pick up with you offline, because some of the issues that you're raising about the fact that in practice you may get few component practitioners to do value chain component work because of the lack of access. That's something that is something that's been flagged by the IESBA with ISSA 5000. That's a performance issue, not necessarily an independence issue for the code. So I think we just need to clarify what that area of concern is, because if we were to go down the line of what you were suggesting, we then wouldn't be aligned with ISSA 5000 would be my concern. So maybe that's something we need to pick up with you. Luigi, on your point, I think we can look at the guidance, because of course the risk assessment that's carried out at the group level is not assurance work, it's the risk assessment, and that's consistent with what's in the approach with ETGA and what's in the FAQ. And I should also have said, of course, in addition to the material that is proposed for the code, there are also FAQs that are in the process of being developed as well. In terms of your question about the applicable independence requirements, like obviously the group sustainability assurance practitioner is independent of the group. If the group sustainability assurance practitioner determines work has to be done in a value chain component, then if they are going to do that work, they need to be independent of that value chain component, but that value chain component only. Or if they get somebody else to do that work, be it another practitioner, then that other practitioner is independent only of that value chain component, not the wider value chain. And that's what we were intending through the expanded guidance. Sylvia, do you want to come in with anything extra on that?
No, Mark, I think you clarified that indeed Luigi's question is in line with what's currently in the ETGA FAQ, and our intention was to be fully aligned with that interpretation that we set out earlier regarding performing audit work at a component. So that was our intention, to create that consistency.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Now, Andy, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good day, everyone. So I just wanted to make sure I communicate, as I have been communicating over these 2 years, my major concern with requiring independence in any circumstances over customers and suppliers, value chain entities that are not within the control of the reporting entity's management. That the reporting entity for sustainability information is the same as the reporting entity for financial statement purposes, but in the sustainability report, they also provide information about the value chain. Well, in this case, value chain components. That's a term in the auditing standards. So the people making the assertions are the management of the reporting entity, and they're providing information about entities that they do not control. And in fact, that is acknowledged in the papers that we had received, specifically in part. I think this is the appropriate time to comment, because it's the only time I saw the questions. It's really a question on the flowchart coming up. But on item 1A on page 5, the second paragraph in the bottom gray box describes that while developing its proposals, Workstream 1 recognized the value chain components are not under the control of the reporting entity. And so I think that's an important concept. That is the, I think we understand that. Thereby obtaining information and evidence of such components could be challenging. And I completely agree. But that is what the IESBA addressed in their providing evidentiary support, et cetera, for the sustainability assurance practitioner's report. But I mean, the essence of my concern and objection is that the auditor is to be independent of those making the assertions, not independent of the evidence that they obtain. So the entity making the assertions is the same reporting entity as for financial statement purposes. And I acknowledge they include information in their reports of the value chain if it's appropriate, essentially scope 3. So I continue to be disappointed that the proposal includes independence of people performing of auditors performing work at these entities, value chain components that are not under the control. The ones that are under the control are part of the entity. Well, I think that's addressed in a different way in the sustainability report, but obviously I have no objection to maintaining independence over the reporting entity's client. So anyway, I just I've mentioned this every time, and so perhaps Gabriella, it's settled matter, but I just, since we're getting near the end, I just want to make sure I clearly communicate that my position is what it is, and I've communicated additional information to the task force separately on that. So anyway, so thank you for the chance to make my remarks.
Can I just pick up on that, Gabriella?
Go ahead, Mark.
Because obviously, Andy, you have expressed your reservations to us and shared your concerns on a number of occasions, and I did use the meeting I was at on Wednesday to discuss very much that challenge with some of the sustainability standards community that were at the IESBA, and you know, we have got a different situation in respect of some sustainability information from the value chain, because it's different in nature to that's disclosed normally in an audit of financial statements. So it's not information that is confirmed as it is in an audit when you obtain confirmations of creditors and similar things. It's actually, in order to provide an assurance opinion, you may be looking at some deeper information that actually requires you to go into the underlying books and records. And I think one of the things that, you know, I have raised as a question is that we are dealing with something that is quite different here, because in the audit context, of course, your suppliers aren't within the reporting boundary. You're right in the sense it's management information that you are confirming as part of the audit process. But within the reporting boundary for a sustainability assurance engagement, you have got information from value chain entities that, as you say, are not controlled by management. But that information is sufficiently significant that there is a need to provide some assurance in respect of it. And it's a bit of a Gordian knot that's created as a result of the product that an assurance provider will be asked to assure. And we have sort of looked through many different lenses, but I'm not quite sure that any of them gives us a route forward that provides that recognises that where you are providing assurance, the provider of that assurance needs to be independent, but it's an unusual construct of the reporting engagement. And I suppose the other thing is, as well, is on that broader question that has been raised about having access to information. I expect it's something that will develop over the early years of sustainability assurance engagements, as in the process that underpins this reporting and assurance will need to mature quite quickly. But in a sense, we need to look at a stable state and provide guidance to help with implementation, rather than write something that would be focused on implementation, but not necessarily 2 years down the line when the process has developed a little further. Sorry, Gabriella, that's
No, you don't have to apologize. This is the natural course of the discussion. So thank you, Mark and Andy, for so openly expressing your position at this stage.
Could I, Chair, can I
Yes.
just quickly,
Yeah.
I mean, it's, if it's appropriate, if I have time.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know, I raised my hand, so that might not have been caught. I still want to emphasize that I think the independence concept is that the public demands that the auditors are independent of those people who are making the assertions. And the assertions are made by the management of the reporting entity. The reporting entity is the same reporting entity as used for financial statement purposes. They're providing evidence about information about the value chain. And it is their responsibility, that is the responsibility of the management of the reporting entity, to collect, develop, and measure and disclose as it sees fit the information from the value chain. Now, that could provide a variety of different concepts, but the value chain entities, the customers and suppliers, do not cause information to appear on the reporting entity's sustainability report. That information appears on the sustainability report because management of the reporting entity causes it to be there. I think we're going to have some interesting, it's an understatement word, when the independence footprint for a reporting entity that uses the same auditor for the financial statements and the sustainability have different footprints for independence. So it's not, to me, where the auditing procedures are performed, because I acknowledge that auditing procedures can be performed at a variety of places. It's who is making the assertions. And I think it's essential that the public is assured that the people making the assertions, that the auditors are independent of the people making the assertions. And so that's my concern. I think it's unassailable that the auditors in the public interest should be independent from those making the assertions. And that's what my focus has been. So anyway, I appreciate the discussion and the chance to respond. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Rich, please.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the paragraph 540.528.2A3, under the model we're currently following, I think it is important that this paragraph, or even a more detailed paragraph, be added because of the issue that is highlighted in the gray box under that paragraph that talks about the IEESB's position on what audit work is, because that would include, as it states there in that gray box, all aspects of planning and performing the group audit. So risk assessment and scoping would be in there. And if we were to apply that, then every value chain entity would be required you would consider having performed work at, because you would have considered them in the scoping and risk assessment, even if only in a minor way. And so I do support having something like this in here. I think it's also important because the way the conformed definition of group component would seem to suggest that there are some entities that could be a component that where the group has a financial interest that is less than equity method accounting. And that would be problematic also for a number of types of organizations out there that do hold equity and positions in a variety of entities. And so I think this is important to include. I presume we have discussed this with the IEESB to make sure we're not going to be at conflict, although I think it is up to us as the independent standard setter to clarify when independence applies. And so I think if you're only scoping and planning, you should not have to be independent. It's only when you go and perform the work to obtain the evidence as it's described here. Thanks.
Thank you, Rich. May I give the floor to Ken, who has asked to speak, and then I'll go back to Christelle, Luigi, and I see Sylvia as well. Sylvia, do you want to clarify anything? Sorry, Ken, I think Sylvia may want to clarify something.
I would let Ken go first, and then
Okay.
if there's anything else, that probably he would address what I wanted.
Okay, Ken.
Well, thank you very much, Gabriela, and thank you, board members who have raised all the comments on the application material that's been added. First of all, I just want to inform the board that this application material paragraph has been shared with the IESBA team. They are supportive of this guidance, but they've advised to elaborate on it to add additional clarity. So that is something certainly Workstream 1 can consider, and that I think would be responsive to your comments, Rich. Secondly, I just want to respond a bit to Andy's comments, which I think is not actually dissimilar or contradictory to, I think, what at least on Workstream 1 the thinking has been. And I think, in fact, it's entirely consistent. The reason why I say this is because we need to understand how IESBA is envisioning work to be performed at the value chain component. In the thinking of the IESBA, assurance work, work that is performed by a component practitioner, in practice will be mostly focused on group components, because it's more likely for a component practitioner to be performing that work because they have direct access to the components underlying information. So, in other words, the IESBA's view is that a component practitioner, when you think about that type of practitioner that's doing the work, they are more likely to be involved with assurance work that's performed at a group component than a value chain component. And if I can maybe read precisely what's in ISA 5000, it's in paragraph A19, and that really gets a point and maybe hammers a point home here. And what paragraph A19 says, and I can put it on the screen, and maybe that's going to be easier if I can just share my screen. I don't. Ashley, could you take down the slides for a moment, please? Just share my screen here so that at least it's going to be easier. So share. So I'm not sure if, do you see my screen here?
Yes, we do screen.
Yes.
Okay. So I've just highlighted paragraph A19 here, and it's very important to understand what this is saying. And I'll just read it. In limited circumstances, the practitioner may be able to be sufficiently and appropriately involved in the work of another firm at a value chain component. I just want to emphasize the words in limited circumstances. And what IESBA goes on to say is, for example, the reporting entity may have a direct business relationship with a supplier that allows management to arrange for the practitioner to obtain access to information at that entity or access to the firm that has performed work on that information. And in those circumstances, if the practitioner intends to use such work and is able to be sufficient and appropriately involved in the work, the other firm is a component practitioner for purposes of the ISA. So to put it another way, it is really in those limited circumstances when the reporting entity has, in effect, controls, management control, maybe, and that's to use your word, Andy, the reporting entity has management control over, be it a customer or be it a supplier, and therefore is able to enable all the necessary access to that supplier or that customer to enable the group firm to be involved in the assurance work that's going to be performed at that supplier or that customer. And in practice, this is most likely to be the case when the supplier is, to use an example, when the supplier is very close to the reporting entity. Because the further down the chain you go in the value chain, the less likely you will have that access. So it's really about those limited circumstances when the reporting entity really has that sort of management control. How that works out in practice, of course, it can take many forms. But the key principle is that there is management control over that value chain component that is almost akin to control that the reporting entity has over group component. And therefore, there's full access, there's full involvement from the group firm in the work that's done by the component practitioner. So that's very important to understand that we're not talking about a lot of component practitioners that are doing work at value chain components. It's really in those limited circumstances. Now, the issue of confirmation has come up quite a few times, and I just want to highlight some guidance that IESBA has developed in the context of, well, no, before we get to confirmations, I've just highlighted here application material A290 that really elaborates on this concept of limited access by the group firm to information at the value chain component. So basically, application material A290 is elaborating on the nature and extent of procedures that might be performed at value chain components in this case, as we're discussing. So if you see here in relation to inspection procedures, what IESBA has said is in some cases, the group may not maintain independent detailed records or documentation of specific sustainability matters relating to group components, and in most cases will not be able to do so with respect to value chain components. So again, that's limited access. The next point is about inspecting records and documents at the component. This is more likely to be the case for group components. The next one is about testing management processes. Due to the limitations that may exist in obtaining information from the value chain, again, it's the same point about limited access. And then we come to this issue of confirmation procedures. And there are basically two circumstances that are addressed in ISA 5000. One is confirmation of information that is maintained by the reporting entity. And essentially what ISA 5000 says is if the group firm or component, well, in this case, it's going to be the group firm that's going to do the work, if they're going to send a confirmation about information about records that are maintained at the group level, this procedure will yield evidence that will be capable of being used by the group firm, and therefore it is work that's performed at the group level. On the other hand, if it is information, if it is a confirmation of information that is not maintained at the group level, because the group does not maintain independent records about the value chain components, and it is a confirmation of information that is obtained directly from the component, that confirmation procedure is not an assurance procedure that will be adequate in and of itself to yield evidence. And that's what the second bullet says here. If the group does not maintain independent records, information obtained in confirmations from the component is merely a statement of what is reflected in the records maintained by the component. So really, we should not get into discussions as to how the assurance work is going to be done, but it's important to understand where the assurance work is being done. And that's what is in the explanations that accompany the application material that's been added. If it is work on information that's maintained at the group level, the group firm doesn't need to be independent of the value chain component. On the other hand, if it is assurance work that is being done on information, on records, on data that is maintained at the value chain component, there needs to be independent because the group firm or the component practitioner is going in and carrying out the assurance work. So these important principles to understand, and the context is very important to understand as well. We're not talking about assurance work being done by the group firm on value chain components as a matter of routine. This is going to be really in limited circumstances. So I'll just stop I'll just stop here and I'll stop my share as well so we can go back. But I really just want to clarify the understanding here. So we're all on the same page. We all have the same understanding that when we're talking about assurance work at a value chain component, it's important to understand where that work is being done, whether it's being done on information that's maintained at the group level, or whether it's information that's maintained at the component level, because that really determines the requirement for independence.
Thank you very much, Ken, for these valuable clarifications, which I hope have been useful. But let's see some reactions from some of you. We have Luigi. I don't know which one, who was first. I think it was Christelle. Sorry, Christelle.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I understand and agree with what Ken has said. I think it has a lot of consistency with what Andy said. My problem is that's not what I read in our draft. I read something much more general, not reduced by an introductory element like in unfrequent situations or whatever that we have in the draft of IESBA, for example. So I am struggling with the fact that the general approach would be that you should be independent from the value chain component, and then you might have a chance to reflect on what kind of work you do and come back get back from this initial thought. I think it would be clearer to say that the same way that IESBA is expressing it and concluding that in these circumstances you should be independent. For me, this is on the substance. This is understandable and acceptable. Yeah.
Thank you, Christelle. So I think that I may conclude that with these clarifications, you are in agreement with the substance of the solution. You think it should be drafted in a way that gives more clarity about what solution and proposal is being put forward, right?
Yeah, how to interpret those reduced cases where you have to be independent instead of stating it in the reverse way. Yeah.
Okay, and thanks again for coming back
and
to
now
with
in the scope outside of the code, but in some guidance or whatever.
Okay. Thank you, Christelle. Luigi, please.
Yeah, and thank you, Ken, for this summary. The point here is that I think that no one knows what will happen with this type of work in future. So far, there is no sufficient experience to conclude whether it would be frequent or not, this situation, because we do not have practical cases or sufficient practical cases. This is a matter that we will experience in future. So for this reason, the code should be right now, considering that we are trying to prepare code which is future-proofing and without having sufficient experience to match it with the reality. Having said that, I have some further comments. During the meeting in September, I understood for the explanation that the task force provided that paragraph 405.32 should have been changed. In fact, it was not changed. And as it is written now, it says that the group sustainability assurance firm need to be independent from the value chain component where the group sustainability assurance firm or a network firm is performing assurance work. From the explanation received during the meeting in September, it was very clear that it was not the case. Only the firm performing the work should have been independent. whether the group sustainability assurance firm or the network firm. And it was also provided a clear example to explain this concept. This is consistent with what it is in the flowchart page 3 of the posted document, but it is not consistent with the flowchart page 8 on the same matter posted on Monday. So I don't know which is the true, but of course I need to understand in order to understand whether or not I am in agreement. I'm still believing that the explanation provided to the board in September was the right one. But as I mentioned in September, the text should be amended in order to make it consistent with this explanation and with the flowchart. As I mentioned, if you read the flowchart, page 8 and page 3 are completely different. Page 8, by the way, is aligned with the text of point 32. Which I'm not in agreement with, of course. Second comment, the definition of group components. In the definition of group components, we ended with the definition that group component is a component required to be included in the reporting group financial statement. It was explained during the September meeting that this should include only the concept of consolidation, which is not. Because as it is written now, as I mentioned in September, it will also scope in any investment in any entity, even if passive investment of 0.0001% or small as you like. And therefore, if there are circumstances where the value chain component are an passive investment of the group assurance client, they will no longer be considered a value chain component. They will be considered a group component, which is technically wrong and not reasonable and balanced. So this should be fixed. I understand that this is the definition agreed with IWSB, but the consequences are defined by the IESBA. So IESBA has the liberty to use and define the proper consequences in order to make it right and not excessive and unreasonable. Another point is relating to the example where the group sustainability assurance client is a PI and the component is not a PI. The task force changed component audit client with group component in the 3 examples, but this would dramatically change the meaning and the approach and the perimeter, because this would mean that any, for example, the 3rd one, any advocacy services for group component, all group component, not just the group component where the component practitioner is performing work at, should create an issue, which is not the case. It is not coherent and consistent with what it has been done for the group audit. So I don't think these are appropriate. It is just a matter of amending the text, correcting it, and making it consistent with the group audit, but it is a matter that should be fixed. I will stop here for the moment.
Thank you very much, Luigi. Mark, do you want to react at this point, or should I give the floor to Amajid? Just because
I'm just going to ask Sylvia to respond on Luigi's points. Sylvia, do you want to come in on those?
Yes, regarding the first point, Luigi, 405.32 and 33, I think what we were talking about in September is in 33, and the situation when it is a network firm that performs an assurance work, and we wouldn't require the entire network to be independent in that case. But I think what we were talking about in September, if that indeed there's a network firm that performs the work, the group firm needs to be independent from the value chain component. And this is consistent. But I recognize the point regarding the slide that maybe we are not clear on that, and using the as appropriate can be confusing. So we will fix that. But the point is that if it's a network firm that performs the assurance work, the group firm needs to be independent, but the rest of the network shouldn't. And that's what's in 32 and 33. And that's consistent with what we discussed in September.
Just a brief reaction. If you go through the recording where it was explained in September at minute 3:50:30, you will see a different explanation that you are providing now. And in any case, page 3 is not coherent and consistent with this explanation.
Okay, I think that Luigi, what you're saying is that there is something to be done in terms of drafting, again, ensuring some consistency and clarity. So I'm sure that, of course, Mark and Sylvia and the task force will go back to these concerns and see if there is anything to do to remove these concerns about possible inconsistencies between what has been explained, what is meant, and what is the proposal, and what is understood by what has been drafted. So I think that this can be fixed and doesn't mean necessarily a problem, right, Sylvia, Mark?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So Amajit.
Sorry, Gabriella, maybe can we react to Luigi's other points?
Okay,
or
of course, sure.
I don't know, Mark, if you want to do that. I just want to point out that regarding the second, the group component issue and how they define the group component, I just want to emphasize and point out that we only set out independence requirements if assurance work is performed at a group component. So if it happens that a value chain component would end up a group component, and it's, as it was mentioned, a 0.00 investment, that it is not likely that assurance work would be performed at that group component. So there would be no independence requirements. So,
Sylvia, sorry to react. It is not really the case, because it could be a value chain component, and therefore work can be done by the group assurance firm, by the component practitioner outside the network, or by another practitioner. But due to the passive investment, it is then qualified group component. And there is a general statement that the group sustainability assurance firm need to be independent with respect to the related entity and all group components. So you are completely changing the scheme and the independence application.
If I could, sorry to jump in here. No, my point was exactly the same. So I thought I might make it now itself. So Luigi, what the point he made, and Rich also earlier mentioned. So you are running this risk of, in case there is very minor financial investment, which is often the case in practice. So are you going to treat a value chain entity as a group component and thereby subject it to higher independence standards? That was a limited point I also had. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amajit. So back to you, Sylvia, Mark. Anything else? Or
I'm turning to Mark. I think we got the point, and we will discuss that within the task force.
Yeah, we're going to discuss it on Monday, so we'll look to address that point. But as I say, the intention is certainly that you are not putting those higher independence requirements on the value chain at all. And if we need to make clearer the point that it's very much linked to assurance work that's being carried out, then we need to look how to bring that into the text so it's consistent.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think that that is very reassuring for those who have been raising these concerns. It's just a matter of making sure that it is clearly understood that you're not meaning or have the intention to put any additional requirements on the value chain components. Okay, thank you for that. I think that Andy is the next one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is just a quick point for the task force to consider as it looks, and I do as I mentioned, Luigi mentioned, I think as we all mentioned, the IEESB is, of course, the one to decide what auditing procedures should be performed and how they should be performed. But if the task force, and I am quite familiar with the final text of 5000 as well as the IESB's S1 and S2, and so all my remarks are grounded in those other professional standards for the reporting and assurance frameworks. But if the task force is turning to A20 with regard to the issue of independence with regard to the value chain as perhaps being almost akin to control, again, if I've said, if the reporting entity controls the value chain, actually, I think it's probably part of the reporting entity. But I don't believe that the IEESB was communicating something akin to control. And I think all it refers to in paragraph 820 is to obtain access to, as opposed to control, monitoring, or an intimate relationship. Such as, remember, if the reporting entity has access to information of a supplier, well, it says direct business relationship. That direct business relationship is that of reporting entity being a customer of the supplier. Customers could say, well, as part of doing business with you, we're going to have various terms and conditions. One of those terms and conditions is that you need to provide us access to your books and records for certain purposes. And it could be for sustainability purposes. I don't believe that having access provided in a commercial relationship is akin to control. So I just would like the task force to look into that, because this doesn't refer to control or the ability to affect the information. It refers to the ability to access the information. I don't think access to information is akin to management control or otherwise. So I'd appreciate it if that forms part of the basis of the task force conclusions for them to, they're just respectively, please look at that. Respectfully, please look at that again. It's earlier. Sorry. Thank you. Thanks for the chance again, Gabriella.
Thank you, Andy. Rich, please.
2 points, and one is going to be procedural, but on this issue that has been raised about a small equity ownership in a value chain entity, I don't think that's will be necessarily rare. You could easily have people owning companies owning equity in small shareholdings or in very material value chain components. Perhaps a key supplier or a key customer, perhaps they took equity or common stock in as partial payment for a sale to a customer. So I don't think we should base our conclusion on the rarity, and I think we need to think about how to explain this in the document. And secondly, Chair, to your point, that I agree with you that I think this is just a drafting issue, not a conceptual difference. And I might suggest it would be helpful for the work stream to have some one-on-one with the actual paragraphs in code open with certain board members who are raising these points to make sure that we see all the conflicting words and get it right well in advance of the next draft coming out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich. Yes, I agree with you, and I think that those tests about what is intended against what it's understood will be very important, because we may be speaking about problems which are not a problem, are just a perception. So these tests should be undertaken. I'm very supportive of it. With the members which are raising these comments, but also probably with other people and those who will have to understand this and use these standards to see if they are well understood without being necessary to undertake a lot of explanations and clarifications and etc. So this is good feedback and input. Thank you very much to you. I don't know, Mark, if you want to come in now, or Sylvia.
No, that's helpful, thank you. And to the extent in the gap we have between now and the meeting, circulating what we can to members individually to check positions, we will do so. I think in terms of as Rich said, sort of conceptually, there isn't a difference. What we're actually trying to do in the context of the value chain is avoid any sort of unacceptable self-review threats that would undermine an independent assurance opinion. And we just need to make sure that we're focused on that, and we're not actually piling on something else as a result of tweaks in the drafting. But we've got a record of all of those comments, Gabriella, and the task force is due to meet on Monday to discuss board members' feedback from this call. So we'll look to respond as soon as we can next week.
Okay, Mark, thank you in advance for another sprint to get this out and tested within the necessary time frame before the next board meeting. I would encourage you, even if necessary, to have one-on-one conversations, sometimes very informally, without the need to prepare many documents or whatever. Just making sure that you progress in terms of clarity, understandability, and etc., to remove any possible false flaw and make sure that everything is well understood. One thing is if board members disagree with the substance of the proposals. Another thing is if they are not comfortable with the way the proposals are expressed and the consistency between the intention and the objective and the draft. And the second one, of course, can be very easily addressed. And I hope that in most of the cases, or almost of the cases here, that's what we are speaking about, apart from any possible very philosophical position about one or two aspects. But I hope that we are able to work on this, and that you will be able to work on this to remove these possible sources of uncertainty or even discomfort. Luigi, I see that you still want to say something.
Yeah, considering that we have still 15 minutes, I would raise another question. In 546, as far as using the work of another practitioner in the context of a group component, the task force included the concept that if the group sustainability assurance client is a PI, the confirmation of independence from the component practitioner should be of a PI nature. I wonder whether this is appropriate, considering that it is a situation where there is no sufficient and appropriate involvement, and there are no possibilities for the group sustainability assurance firm to have any influence on the work of the component practitioner. It seems to me that the task force is creating a barrier to use the work of the other practitioner in these rare circumstances, which means that it is more likely than not that this independence with respect to the rules applicable to PI would not be possible. And therefore, this is an impossible requirement, basically.
Sylvia, did you want to just respond quickly on that one?
Yes, and in 5406, we only require that in the case of a group component. And I think this is the approach that we communicated before. Now we just included that explicitly in the code, because we believe that if it's a group component, so the assurance work is performed within the group, there is a reasonable expectation for the firm and the other practitioner to be able to communicate at least, and also that the same independence requirements would apply across the group. So this is only applicable for a group component, but this is a different situation when it is a value chain component, for the same reason you mentioned, Luigi, because we recognize that this is outside of the client, and there's a different scenario. So this is actually not a change to the previous approach.
No, I want, whether or not it's a change, I don't know, frankly. I didn't went back to review this matter. My point is that we are in a situation here where there is no possibility. It could be rare, as it is written into the ISA 5000, but it could be just temporary. as they are stating. But if this happens, asking this type of requirement means that it is more likely than not that would not be possible. And therefore, we are saying, well, we do not accept this position. This is what our requirement is saying so far.
This certainly wasn't our intention to make it possible. It's simply just recognizing the type of work and also that we want to keep it consistent, that if the firm is using another practitioner, a component practitioner, so the independence requirements supposed to be at the same level. But we will definitely discuss that point as well at the meeting on Monday.
Thank you, Sylvia. Apparently one more situation where the problem or the issue is not the substance, but the way it is being conveyed. So again, thank you in advance for the work that you may be doing on this to make sure that everything is clear. Anyone else? Marco, Sylvia, do you want to conclude, or is it fine?
I think we've got everything we need from this discussion for our meeting on Monday, and we'll revert back on the back of that, unless Ken, you've got anything to add.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that Sylvia has captured all of Luigi's detailed comments so that we can circle back to workstream 1. Do you have all of Luigi's detailed comments? If not, maybe I'll ask Luigi to just forward his comments to you, Sylvia, so we can kind of consider them.
I have my notes, but it's always appreciated if we can have a written summary just to be sure that everything is properly captured. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add, on top of thanking everyone, that any suggestions that you may have in terms of clarity that can be provided, alternative wording or something like that, if there is a good proposal, I think that it should be shared, because it might be helpful for the task force instead of being looking at what they drafted themselves, which is sometimes difficult. If there is any proposal that you want to make, of course, I'm not asking for anything, but just opening the door for that possibility. Ken?
Thank you, Gabriella. And yes, so workstream 1 will consider all the comments. I just want to perhaps put out a word of caution here in terms of what is going to be feasible to put in the code. A number of the questions or comments that have been raised during the call today are quite technical, especially around the issue of the meaning of assurance work performed at a component. And therefore, it is going to be a matter of striking the right balance in terms of what would be appropriate to put in the code at the principles level, and to do it in a way that's going to be future-proof, and what would be better to be sitting outside the code in FAQs, implementation guides, and what have you. So I just want to manage a bit of the expectations as to what the board can expect to be seeing in terms of the revised wording around this application material paragraph or paragraphs, wherever workstream 1 is going to land. And it's always a delicate issue or a delicate task to manage the balance of requirements and application material, because we don't want an issue to become so dominant that it's kind of crowds out all the other provisions in the code. So again, we're going to be very sensitive to and responsive to the comments from the board, but at the same time, as I say, there will be matters that would be better addressed in terms of details, in terms of examples, additional guidance, etc., outside of the code rather than inside the code.
Thank you for that word of caution. Ken, very welcome. So I think that we don't have anyone else wanting to speak. So I think that I'm positive about this discussion, because as I was saying, apparently in most of the cases there is probably additional work to do, a little bit of additional work to do to make sure that the intention is consistent with the drafting. and the understandability. So I will thank you in advance to the task force for the work that they will still have to undertake with the help of the board members who rose these concerns, but others may want to be collaborative. And I think that this puts us in a very good position for the next steps on this on the finalization of the IESA, which is for the task force to advance some revised proposals in terms of the drafting and prepare the papers for the board for the December board meeting, and hopefully for a significant agreement around these proposals. I would like to 100% free in what we can do. Namely, with respect to some of these proposals, we have an ETGA engagement team and group audit framework that we cannot disregard. And this has to be consistent also with that. So we have to ensure consistency with the IESB's positions and ETGA and etc. And this is a very delicate exercise. It is also possible that not everything will be perfect on day one. Even if we that's what we want and that's what we are working for, but I think that we have been developing a robust proposal, very robust, and that we should be satisfied that what is now being proposed with a better drafting or some revised drafting or whatever satisfies our common purpose of delivering something as soon as possible, which serves the final and complete infrastructure of standards and is operable, is strong, is robust, and is really fit for purpose to complete this infrastructure that we have been speaking about. So my time to thank the board members who reviewed these proposals so carefully and in such a level of detail. The comments reflect that, and this is, of course, helpful and just contributes to make sure that the final product will be really solid, robust, strong. Thank you very much for these constructive, I would say, very constructive contributions to the final product and the finalization. And I would suggest, unless anyone has anything else to say, that we break now for a 15 minutes short break and reconvene at and that's my time of getting something wrong, but I'd say 10:40 in New York time, 40 minutes after the hour. Okay, thank you very much. See you soon. So welcome back. I don't think we have everyone yet, so let's wait 1 minute. Okay, I think we are ready to restart. Thank you for joining again. I hope you had a good cup of coffee and that you are ready for the next session on experts. I'd like to, of course, to start by thanking Lori, the task force, and the staff also for the great work they have been doing. Adjusting, still speaking with stakeholders as far as I know, and progressing on a revised version of the standards with respect to the version presented to the September board meeting, so that it may satisfy some concerns and achieve a more balanced position and a more balanced proposal. So I'll give the floor to Lori now for the presentation. Lori, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gabriella. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. Today, our goal is to take the board through the revisions that we've made to the draft standards since the September posted papers, which we all saw at the September board meeting. Since that board meeting, we've had a 2-day task force meeting, as well as several follow-up task force calls to go through revisions that were largely based on the comments we received from you in that meeting. Many of you, since we posted these papers, several of you at least, have provided comments to us either orally and in writing. We will be dealing with those comments next week. We have another task force meeting. So if we don't get to those today, please don't be concerned. We're sort of working on the cycle of dealing with the comments from the board meeting that are incorporated in the documentation you're looking at. And we will pick up those other comments in the next meeting that we have. And I rest assured that we're taking all of those seriously. So without further ado, I mean, I think we've made very good progress as a task force team. Obviously, Andy, Sadia, Luigi, me, Cam, Joanna, and Ken put a lot of time into this. I will hand this over to Cam, who's going to kick off starting through the slides, followed by Joanna. And we welcome comments and questions as we work through this today. As always, your help is very useful to the task force. So Cam, over to you.
Thanks, Lori. So as I think Gabriella and Lori both mentioned, the set of revisions that have been posted and that we'll walk through today are informed by the September board meeting and other advanced comments provided offline during then, and also some other additional outreaches that have occurred since from September till the posting of the papers. So the summary of the key revisions in section 390 and thereby also 290 as appropriate, that is with respect to firstly the objectivity evaluation in relation to the use of an external expert's work for an audit and review engagement. So that includes the period covered for the objectivity evaluation and also the proportionality of the request for information. Other revisions that were made responsive to comments received were in relation to pressure. So pressure on the PA, and examples have been added in the text. Revisions in relation to safeguards with respect to adding in an additional safeguard with respect to addressing threats identified to the external experts' objectivity, and also other revisions related to multiple experts, where we've essentially withdrawn the previous proposals, because the key issue that is related to multiple experts is already contained in the text of identifying threats, and we'll go through that more. Other changes include inherent limitations in evaluating the external experts' competence, capabilities, and objectivity. That paragraph has also been withdrawn as, and we'll explain why more later. And also the task force thinking with respect to comments received on section 290. So this, I'll first jump into the objectivity evaluation for audits and reviews, and this is in relation to the period covered. So standing back, what we've received were essentially two ranges of comments, so two extremes. One is that the time frame included in the ED, which was the period of the audit and assurance report and the engagement period, that was the period for objectivity evaluation, that was too onerous. And we've also had another set of views was that the time frame should be extended, and that should be the period of the audit and assurance report until the issuance of such report. So the end of the engagement period. Trying to strike a balance, an appropriate balance between these two sets of views. The task force does note, acknowledges that it is challenging for the external expert to be able to provide sort of forward-looking information past the completion date of their work. So, what kind of financial interest will you have in the future after you've already finished your work? So that is all almost a crystal ball as of the date when the external expert is providing the information. And so, however, this also needs to be balanced with the fact that there are threats to the external expert's objectivity that might arise, which may impact their objectivity following the completion of their work, and which will impact the perception of the PA's objectivity right up to the issuance of their report. So what the task force has done here is firstly to shorten, and I'm just going to go to this slide here, to firstly shorten the time frame for the initial request for the PA to provide the information for the evaluation of objectivity. So this request now will be from the beginning of the period covered by the audit review or other assurance report until the completion of the expert's work. So the expert will have to provide information with respect to that. In addition, the external expert has to commit to communicating any changes in the information provided with respect to the green box that we've just discussed until the issuance of that report. So any changes in the information they've provided since the completion of the external expert's work until the issuance of the audit assurance or other review or other assurance report. If the PA receives the communication of any such changes in information, the PA needs to reevaluate the external expert's objectivity and go through the CCO evaluation, the objectivity evaluation again, and reconclude. And so thereby with these two prongs, so the green box over on the screen and the blue box on the screen, the period covered for the objectivity evaluation now is extended to include the period covered by the audit review and other assurance report all the way through to the issuance of the report through this methodology. The other thing that I mentioned with respect to the objectivity evaluation for audits and reviews is with respect to the proportionality of the request for information. So the task force has been hearing quite a lot that it would be an issue, in particular for small, medium practitioners, to find external experts due to this list, the ED list request for information, and that this at the end of the day would create a barrier, disproportionate barrier, and would hamper quality. Acknowledging these comments, what the task force has done, we've segregated the requirements into audit and review engagements that are for PI clients versus non-PI clients. Because of the heightened public interest for PI clients, so for PI audits and reviews of PI clients, the initial requirement with respect to the long list of information that a PA has to request and evaluate, that list has been maintained for such engagements. For engagements of audits and reviews for non-PI clients and all other assurance engagements, excluding, I should point out, excluding sustainability engagements that meet the Part 5 criteria, the requirements to obtain information has been proportionalized. So there's essentially 3 requirements there and a catch-all requirement, which requires the PA to consider if any other information is needed. So here we've developed an infographic, which hopefully is helpful. It's sort of a guide to how the proposals stand as now. So it's been split, as I've mentioned, it's been segregated into a requirement to request it for non-PI audits and reviews and all other assurance engagements. So the PA has to request information from the external expert on 3 matters in order to evaluate objectivity. These 3 matters are on financial interests, conflicts of interest, and also any previous or current engagements with the external expert and the entity at which it's performing work at. Furthermore, then the PA has to consider whether or not there's a need to request additional information about any other interest, relationship, or circumstance that may impact the objectivity of the external expert. And application material has been added as factors to help the PA determine whether or not it does need to do this further request. For PI clients, for audit and reviews of PI clients and sustainability assurance engagement that meet Part 5 criteria, the PA still, like set out in the ED, must request information from the external expert on the list of matters. So that's a list of matters from A to O that is now set out in 390.14. For all clients, essentially, the PA must also request that the external expert also provide such information as relevant for non-PI or PI for all members of that external experts team. So this is no change from the ED, but for non-PI, there's a proportional requirement now. And similar to the ED as well, where the client is not the entity at which the external expert is performing work, the PA is required to request information on 3 matters, which is aligned with what was set out in the ED. This has been elevated to a requirement in response in response to comments from regulators as well. Finally, the PA at this point needs to consider whether or not, similar to the non-PI situation, there is a need to request any additional information with respect to the client in those circumstances, and a list of factors has been provided as application material for the PA to help in that determination. With respect to the objectivity evaluation, another clarification that the task force has made, and this is in regards to concluding on whether or not the external expert has the necessary objectivity for the PA's purpose. The task force heard many comments that the PA might not be able to obtain or is unable to obtain information from the external expert due to privacy or confidentiality concerns, which means that they would be hence unable to conclude on the external expert's objectivity. the task force recognizes this, and furthermore notes that there are various situations where this might happen, where the external expert either refuses or is unable, or for whatever other reason is unable to provide information. This could be, number one, due to law and regulation. It could be, number two, due to an inability to obtain consent from the external expert's immediate family or employing organization to disclose such information. Or it could be due to an outright refusal to provide such information, which the PA would understand either during agreeing the terms of engagement, or if something happens after agreeing the terms of engagement and the external expert is no longer willing or unable to provide such information, there's an outright refusal to provide this information. So bearing these three scenarios in mind, the task force has also clarified how to conclude on the external expert's objectivity in these circumstances by introducing new application material following the conclusion paragraph. What this states is that it provides examples of essentially where the confirming essentially where the PA is unable to determine that the external expert has the necessary CCO, then the PA would not be able to conclude. And so it provides two of those scenarios in this and the application material added. Finally, with respect to the objectivity evaluation, and this is for all professional services, during the September board, there was a call to reinstate the factor and example of a self-review threat to using the work of the external expert. So that has been reinstated with some revisions in yellow. Firstly, to ring fence the self-review threat so that it's not too broad. And secondly, also to add an example in A3, you'll see it highlighted in yellow of a self-review threat that was suggested by a monitoring group member as well. And with that, let me go back to the slide really quickly. But with that, maybe I'll ask Lori, did you want to add anything on this, on what we've gone through, what I've gone through on the objectivity evaluation? Otherwise, I might pause for questions. We can, yeah.
No, nothing to add now. Let's pause and see if anybody wants to jump in here.
Okay, thank you very much, Cam and Lori. We can now open the floor for comments or questions. David, please.
Thank you, Gabriella. I just wanted to say to Lori and to Cam, you guys did a great job at addressing the pressure point, which was one of the points I know I raised in September, and I just want to say thank you for that.
You're very welcome, David. But I mean, I think it was a great point, so we were happy to think through that.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Rich, please. Sorry, I was.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the task force. I particularly like how you've separated the sections on assessing competence, capability, and objectivity separately. I think it makes it easier to understand. Your presentation today helped me understand something, although I didn't get it from just reading the words, and that is with the change to the period of the information through the end of the work of the external expert, and then the separate requirement to which I think says that they have to provide any update. Yes, that's the slide. What you're saying is that they are effectively telling you about anything that has changed all the way through the issuance of the report. So would that include, for example, if they entered into a new relationship or interest that didn't exist before, after the work was completed and before the report was issued? Because I think in some cases, particularly on the assurance side,
yeah,
this work can be a lot later.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, Rich, the idea, it isn't that it would rule them out. I think it's that it's just something the PA needs to know about
Yeah, you need to be told and then
You just need to be
evaluate.
aware so you can look and say, oh yeah, that doesn't impact what we're doing, right? And you know, in the real sense of the world, if we could make all kinds of carve-outs, but not in this case, but it just gets too complicated. So I think we left it at the hey, just let us know, and then we go from there. Does that make sense to you, Rich?
It does. I'll be honest, I didn't pick up that's how the assessment worked from just reading the words, but I get it now that the presentation was here. Okay. If I may switch to real quick, the situation that was briefly referenced where the external expert is doing the work at an entity that is other than the client. And I get that you have limited what they have to ask about the client, but I didn't see anything to address assessing the objectivity of the expert from the entity where it's doing the work. Did I miss that concept? Because that would seem somewhat important too.
Yeah, could I just clarify? So the requirements to assess the objectivity is for the PA to request information at the entity at which it's performing work. So it may not be the client. And then there's a separate requirement just to recognize that fact that where it is not the client, you have to also request these
information on the client.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And then my third category relates to the adjustments for non-PIs. And while I think I understand the practical challenges in some ways, on the other hand, we are using a to best of your knowledge and belief standard. And it strikes me to not ask about material business relationships and lending relationships, to name two prominent items. It seems like those would be things that clearly would weigh on objectivity if you became aware of them. So I just ask you to think about that. You don't have to respond now. Thanks.
Thanks, Rich. As always, good points. This is a little hard to read. I see Amanjeet has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm not sure if it is the right time to raise this issue. It's a very minor point, though. This is on the factors that are relevant in determining whether to request information about any additional interest relationships or circumstances from the external experts. There's a list of items there. This is 390.17A1. So can I make that point now, or you think it is coming later?
Cam, are we covering that one later?
No, this is perfect timing to raise it now.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks. So you've listed some 7 items under this list, the factors that are relevant. So I had some difficulty with the second last bullet point, which talks about the geographical distance of the entity at which the external expert's work is being performed relative to the client. So I'm not very sure whether you really need this, because this can be a little misleading. I mean, today's world, geography is less important. I mean, you could be next door neighbor and you could just be perfect strangers, and you could be miles away and still be close. So I really don't know whether you really want this. I have no strong objection if you want to keep it. I think the premise is if some entity is located close to the client, there is a possibility of some relationship because of the geographical connect. But as I said, the nature of relationship is more important, which you already covered in the previous point, rather than the geography or the geographical location of the client and the entity. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanjeet. We'll pick that up with the group next week. Have a relook. Do we have anybody else?
I don't think so.
Christelle, I think Christelle, did you have your hand up? No. Right, I'm just sliding through. If I'm missing anybody, someone please tell me. All right, Cam, I think you keep going.
All right, and then passing on to Joanna.
Thank you, Cam, and thank you, Laurie. So yes, as Cam mentioned before, regarding the pressure, task force proposed to add 2 examples of pressure. The first one, new 39010A2, has been added under a new subtitle, additional consideration when evaluating competence, capabilities, and objectivity. It is to address concerns from IESBA participants and a monitoring group member. So briefly, allowing an external expert to start work before the PA confirms their necessary CCO might pressure the PA to validate the expert CCO, even if the evaluation suggests otherwise. So this is what this paragraph is about. This pressure could arise if the expert work is nearly complete, considering the time, the cost, and deadlines involved. So additionally, as you see, it incorporates a cross-reference to the extant code sections 270 on pressure. So we also have a second example so it's a second bullet added under 39023, identifying threats. So it's further below. And this is the situation when the PA uses the work of an external expert. So this added example of intimidation threats is a response to suggestions to include pressure on the PA to cherry pick expert work so that meets a particular outcome. So as you see, a professional accountant feels pressure to use the work of an external expert in order to meet internal or external targets and expectations. Next slide, please, Cam. So here on the subject of the safeguards, the first bullet refers to all professional services and examples of actions that might be safeguards to address threats to an external expert objectivity. They briefly include consulting with qualified personnel or a professional outside the firm. Well, this is the something we have added to have the necessary expertise to evaluate the external expert work for the intended purpose. The other one might be requesting the external expert to take steps to address the conflict of interest. For example, implementing measures to segregate the work from such a conflict of interest. Here, the term ethical walls has been removed as it might be specific to some firms only. So we decided to, task force decided to remove this term. And also the third bullet has been added regarding the restructuring or reassigning the part of work, giving rise to the threat to another external expert. So those safeguards have been considered as not realistic for SMPs, as they might not have a qualified personnel at their disposal or sufficient individuals to segregate their work from such a conflict of interest. In response to some comments, the task force added an example of another safeguard, as I said before, about the restructuring or reassigning the part of external work. And the second bullet refers to all audit, review, and other assurance clients, and gives, this is the 39018A4, and gives examples of actions they might be safeguards to address the threats to the external expert objectivity, and include requesting the external expert to reduce, to simplify, to reduce their financial interest until it's not longer significant, make the close business relationship less important, or make sure that the person doesn't handle tasks that their immediate family member, who is a director, officer, or influential employee, is responsible for, especially those related to financial or non-financial information the accountant will review. The third safeguards here is about returning gifts or other benefits to the entity as soon as possible after they were accepted. So here, task force, after our discussions in September, in October, would welcome any other suggestions from the IESBA participants for the safeguards. If you have any, we are would be very happy to consider those. Next slide, please. So these are other matters that Cam mentions in the beginning of the presentation. The first one about with respect to the using the work of the multiple external experts. The task force noted that IESBA participants found unclear what threat and what issue those paragraphs were addressing. So they observed that there are valid reasons for the external expert to work to address a large or dominant proportion of the professional service. For instance, experts might be needed for valuing real estate, oil, gas reserve, etc., and tax valuation, for example. The question raised was why using the work of multiple external experts, each properly evaluated for their CCO, should be problematic, and what the nature of that issue would be. The task force notes that the external expert work is always material in some way, whether qualitatively or quantitatively. Otherwise, the PA would not have engaged the external experts. So the task force believes that the main issue is relying too much on multiple external experts, and this over-reliance or undue reliance raises doubts about whether the professional accountant can still be ultimately responsible for this service, and if they have necessary skills to do so. Since this concern is already covered in section 390.23, the task force suggests removing this paragraph in question. The second matter, inherent limitation in evaluating external expert CCO. This paragraph has been withdrawn in response to the comment from IESBA participant that the second sentence seems to imply that the external expert work still can be used, even if there is lack of information to evaluate their CCO. Under such circumstances, the PA is prohibited from using the work of such external expert. So this paragraph has been withdrawn. The third point, section 290, the task force received a comment from the IESBA participant regarding external experts employing organization and a request referring explicitly to employing organizations perspective through the text. The task force considered this comment very carefully, and this suggestion that in most instances a PAIB is not the one who enters into the contract directly with the external expert, but this is rather the PA's employing organization. The IESBA participant also noted that the parties to the contract will be the expert and the employing organization, and that even if a responsible party of the employing organization signs the contract. So even though they are signing as a representative of the employing organization, while considering that, while recognizing that experts are contracted by PA employing organization, the task force does not believe that it would be appropriate to bring the PA's employing organizations into provisions. And this is because in substance, it is the PAIB who is engaging the external expert to help him get the job done, and who determines to use the work of an external expert as a safeguard when the PA has insufficient expertise to perform the professional activity. This determination is made by the PA to fulfill the PA's obligation under the code, and not the PA's employing organization. Therefore, the responsibility for evaluating the external expert CCO and evaluating and addressing threats to the PA's compliance with the fundamental principles lies with the PA who is using the external expert work. Bringing the PA's employing organization into the provisions of Section 290 might inadvertently create obligation for the employing organization. In practice, the task force acknowledged that in most instances, the contract will be entered into between the external expert and the PA's employing organization. However, the task force does not believe it is necessary for Section 290 to address the practical arrangements for how the external expert might be engaged. Finally, the fourth point and the last point of this slide, it is about the review of the text, the part about the external experts from a requirements only standalone. It was done by the task force during their last meeting and considered satisfactory. Adjustment made for clarity result in 13 requirements as compared to 8 in the previous version in September. Thank you. I will pass to Cam.
Thanks, Joanna. And so just following on from the review of the provisions, the draft text from a requirements only standpoint, this was a suggestion from our PIOB observer then, Janine, and we did that. And following that, and Rich, you mentioned that earlier in the meeting, we split out that initial requirement to require a PA to evaluate the CCO for the PA's purpose into 3 separate requirements to enhance the flow, and so that the application material following each, whether it's competence, capability, or objectivity, can follow that, and so that it flows and better with that respect. In that respect,
Cam, I would just add that when we did that, and for the avoidance of doubt, because this is requirements, there's nothing in there that wasn't already in the exposure draft. It's a question of clarity and splitting things out and moving them around. And some things that were under requirements sort of graduated into a requirement, but they were already in the exposure draft, in case anybody was wondering about that. Cam, I don't know if I said that as well as you would have, but I think that's important.
Yeah. Okay, then, oops, just trying to flip to the next slide. Okay, so on the next slide here is our flow chart. We have to show a flow chart at every meeting. So this flow chart has been revised following very helpful comments, offline comments from board members. And essentially what it does here is we're trying to clarify all the different individuals that could be involved in an audit, and setting out that there's only 3 types of individuals that can be involved in an audit, which could potentially be experts, and this flowchart helps to set out what type of expert they are. So there's only engagement team member, audit team member, and external expert that could be involved in an audit. And so the flowchart has been simplified to set out question 1, is that individual performing audit procedures, regardless of whether they're employed by the firm or engaged by the firm? If it's yes, then you're an engagement team member, you're subject to independence. And if it's a no, the question is, question 2, is that individual performing consultations, for example, such as required under systems of management quality control, and regardless of whether they're employed or engaged by the firm? And if yes, that would be an audit team member and independence is required. If the answer to both question 1 and 2 are no, then you are an external expert subject to section 390 that will be added to the code, hopefully after December. So that is the revised flowchart, and back to you, Lori.
Okay, great. And that flow chart, as many of you know, has evolved a lot over time. I always think when you get to writing that is simpler and shorter, that means you're finally at the part where you know what you're doing. So thank you everyone for your comments, and it did end up in a simpler form, which is, I think, much easier to understand. So next steps, we have a task force meeting, as I mentioned in the intro, next week. We'll be picking up comments that we hear from here today. Several of you have made some that I've committed to picking up, as well as things that people have provided to us in writing or orally over the last week. We'll be posting materials in a few weeks. And then obviously board meeting and any revisions during the meeting as we get to the final process and vote. So that's what we've got ahead of us. I would say we'll pause for some more comments and questions, I think, at this point, Cam, because we've got we covered a few slides since we last paused, but we'll pick anything up and turn it around for you. So let's pause there. I don't know if anybody's hand is up. I'm gonna scroll through here. My screen's a little slow loading these.
Chana, Lori.
Chana?
We have Chana.
Chana, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie and Cam and the task force for all the work on the revisions. So my point was not to incorporate employing organizations throughout the text. It's to recognize that the PAIB in business or professional accounting in business has some constraints and has to work through the organizations, policies, delegation authorities, and so on. And for me, some of the provisions were written in a way that a member in public practice would deal with it. And in a PAIB context, probably only the CFO would be in a position to do similar things. So I think I have sent some follow-up comments as well, which, Laurie, you said the task force will consider. So my point is that we have to recognize that the PAIB, even the ones just below the CF4, would have some constraints. And those are generally dealt very well in section 260 and 280. And a few provisions in section 290 are not there yet.
Yeah, and Shauna, thank you. And I did see your comments and I saw some back and forth going on. So we'll have a look at that when we meet next week. And if we need to, we'll reach out. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Laurie.
Thank you, Shauna, as always. I see Janine. Before we get to Janine, do we have any other board members? Christelle, Janine, we'll save you for the cherry on top of the sundae. I see Christelle.
David as well.
David and Christelle. Yep. Christelle, do you want to go first? Then we'll pick up David. No, Christelle, no hand. Oh, you're on mute, Christelle.
Sorry, my hand is not raised, so
okay.
I don't know why.
Oh, I don't know. It was for a second. Okay, David. David, you can jump in. Thanks, Christelle. Sorry about that.
Perfect. Thank you. I also wanted to comment on a couple of other things. The flowchart, I think, to a point made a little bit earlier, makes it a whole lot easier to understand, you know, where you fall in the context. And I think we talked about this in terms of decision boxes. So they provide some clarity, which was perfect. I really liked it. And I also liked that you made it really clear about the prohibition and remove that confusion around, you know, what you should be considering if in fact you can't rely on the information. So that clarification I thought was really good. To build a little bit on what Jana has said, if you want some real life examples that are relatable, Laurie, for the PAs in business, I'm quite happy to lend you some examples as well, if that would be helpful.
Thank you, David. We'll reach out separately if we feel we're needing that. I know we've struggled a little on this point, so we're not trying to ignore any of it. I think it's just we're trying to get to the right answer. So thanks.
Welcome.
All right. Do I have anybody else? I think Janine.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I also like to, well, first maybe say thanks also for looking at the requirements without the application material to see whether they're complete, clear, and so on. Good to hear that you picked that up and did that. But I have a few questions just to be sure that we understand it correctly. On the best of their knowledge and belief, so for PIs and non-PIs. And my question is, if I read those requirements and the sentences, then it doesn't say anything about whether it should be written or whether there is an expectation or a requirement on procedures, because you can also answer a question or something that addresses or says to the best of your knowledge and your belief, and you can say, yes, I don't know about any conflicts or whatever the issue is. But if you first have to do procedures, then if you then come to the conclusion, yes, to my best knowledge and belief, that is a very different situation. So where is that? Why is that not in this part of the code? And also, if I look at the IESB, I know they're also going to do, of course, a follow-up project on experts, but in the current standards, there is there are not such kind of wording. It's you have to assess or you have to get a confirmation, and it doesn't go into to the best knowledge or whatever. So can you clarify for me how that?
Yeah, Janine, maybe I'm gonna say one thing, and then I'm gonna have Cam jump in to make sure that I have this right. The PA has to assess, has to request for the information, and has to assess it. The best of knowledge and belief goes to the expert themselves. Okay, not the PA's obligation. The PA's obligation is absolute. They have to ask for the information. They have to look at it all together and then assess objectivity and make an objectivity determination. So the best of knowledge and belief relates to the expert who's completing and providing the information. Cam, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, and that was that wording really was also responsive to feedback that external experts might not have that system of quality management monitoring all these relationships very extensively. So therefore, they had to make the best effort they could to get all this information and respond to them. So that comes back to the external experts' best knowledge and belief from that respect.
Does that answer your question, Janine? I think the other thing is, to the extent there's something somewhere, for, if you're in an organization far away that you're not aware of, even though you've filled this out, it's very unlikely it's impacting your objectivity anyway at that point, right? If you're an expert. And I think, so the best of knowledge and belief, as Cam noted, is responsive to a feedback we got during the exposure draft period about the complexity of some of this for people who, unlike PAs, don't have all these systems in place, etc.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Thanks for explaining. My personal concern at this point was for pies mostly, because there I think the argument on those organizations that employ these experts may not have these systems in place. Maybe that is with non-pies much more prevailing than with pies. But my question is, could it also be interpreted in practice and people saying we complied with the code when you get only an oral response from an expert? Yes, to our knowledge and belief, we know a problem. And is there any requirement that they first need to, that they need to do procedures for this? Or is it just the expert saying, okay, I need to respond to this request to the best of my knowledge and belief? Well, I can just answer it myself without consulting with my within the company with some department in the company that knows what kind of engagement they're doing for what kind of clients or what kind. How does that work? Because if I only take the requirements, it could be fulfilled very simply without doing any procedures, with a verbal response and not necessarily a written response. That was more my question. Or is that dealt with somewhere else in the code that I should also take into consideration when reading this requirement here in section 390?
Yeah. So the oral question is a good question. I don't think we focused on that very much. There's enough that has to be looked at. I think that there's sort of an assumption that it would be in writing. Cam, I don't know if you have any comments. We hadn't actually focused on that.
Yeah, what we did set out is that even if the external expert does provide that information orally, their expectation is to provide it in, they do need to perform all the work in the good faith. The wording best of knowledge and belief, that really was leveraged from the IESBA requirement with respect to the requirement on obtaining management representation letter. That is that wording, and following the September meeting where where there was questioning on that. And so it is a good question. I see Ken has his hand up, so maybe he can come in with any additional inputs.
Yes, thank you, Cam. And I was just, well, first of all, the expectation of the external expert providing the necessary information for purposes of the PAs or the auditors' work is set out in the requirement to agree the terms of engagement. And there it's in paragraph of 390.5. The requirement is very clear that it is for the accountant to agree the terms of the engagement with the external experts, including the context of audit reviews and assurance engagements, information needed. And there maybe I would ask the task force, and maybe that's a point that can be taken back for further reflection, whether we can maybe make that expectation a bit more explicit, that the information is going to be conveyed or communicated from the external expert to the auditor, the accountant, in writing.
Yeah.
So the provision of information in writing for purposes of the accountant's work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and if I may respond to the what is in the ISA with the rep letter or the representations from management, that is a sort of, that's not audit evidence in itself, what you get. The only thing is if you need to have this letter to issue your opinion, because it could be an indication that management actually has not told you everything. And on top of that, you then also, of course, have collected already all your other evidence, also your independence and so on. So I'm not sure if we can compare or use that argument of the representation letter, and that there the wording is in there in itself, to compare it to this external experts part. But that's just something that I have in my mind, just for you to reflect upon whether that really makes sense. Because I'm also sort of thinking, shouldn't there be some kind of procedures to the extent possible that an expert should do to come to the
So Janine, that's where I
potential.
was going to
Yeah.
jump in.
Yeah.
Let's see. We'll take that away. I don't have an answer for you right now, so I don't want to pretend that. But let us take away that thought and whether there's a way to tweak that language about an expectation that, good faith procedures will be applied to ascertain and support that belief. I'm not saying that right, but there's a way to do that sentence, I think, that would get to your point, that at least makes it more clear that, you don't just put your finger up in the air and say, oh yeah, okay, that's good. You need to do something. So we'll take that away and see if we can get some more clear language about the expectation, as well as the oral versus writing issue, as Ken noted, in response to your point.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Very useful. And by the way, thank you about the recommendation to lay out all the R requirement things. That we had a very lively debate about that when we did that lasted quite a while. So it was actually very helpful.
Good to hear. Thank you. Yeah.
So, Lori, I don't see anyone else.
Right. I don't.
So do you?
I think we're set. Thank you for all the feedback today. It gives us some good things to work on next week, and we will turn another draft around and have that back to you. I think 19th of November is posting. So please watch for that. I see Ken's hand up. Ken, are you intending for that, or nope? That's not. So thanks everything, and thanks to the task force who's been just doing fantastic work on this, and Cam and Joanna, who are doing the lion's share of the lifting, as you all know. So thank you.
Yep. So Gabriela, just before you close, or maybe as you close, just an administrative matter I'd like to raise at this point.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's really just, and I'm gonna ask board members to be available just to for a picture that we're gonna put on our social channels. So as we close, I think Asti is gonna do a screenshot, and would like everybody to flash their widest smile possible, so that we can capture that on our social channels. Asti, do you want to do that?
Yes, I'm on it now. Hold on. Yep, done. Thank you.
Thank you, Asti. Over to you, Gabriela.
Thank you very much. This is a very fair request, and I think it's a good way of almost finishing our meeting. So thank you very much, Lori, task force, Joanna, Cam, for the work done, for the improvements done, included in the proposal, for the very thorough way you are addressing the comments you are receiving from stakeholders and the discussions that we had in September. So from the comments we received, I think that we are very well positioned to finalize this very quickly. I would almost ask for an approval today, but I will refrain myself from those kind of requests and patiently wait for the first week of September. Thank you so much for this. Before I close out, just like to ask Janine, because I was waiting for the end of the meeting to ask you if you wanted to say anything else, namely on sustainability, where you didn't intervene. I assume that you don't have anything special, but anyway, I'd like to give you the opportunity to say something before we wrap up.
Yes, thank you, Gabriela, and thank you everyone for the good meeting, good discussions on when I look at the sustainability topic. Those were indeed a lot, technical issues, but that's important, of course. Sometimes the devil is in the detail, they say. And it's very important also to strike the right balance, and that is not always very easy, but it's at the end of a project can be still a challenge. So good that going forward, focus will be put further on the clarity and consistency regarding the independence requirements, and whether these are proportionate in the different circumstances. but also with a view to keeping the consistency with the terminology and definitions used in ISA 5000, as was also said by Gabriella, that is important. So yes, good. And thank you also, I like to say, to the task force for having the flowchart even expanded by the different perspectives, because I think that's very important. That was also in our PI issues document that we as PIOB published. So thanks for that. The consistency, of course, with the requirements is very important in ISA, as was clear from the discussion. So there is still some work to be done, and we are looking forward to the next board meeting for the outcome of all your deliberations going forward. And on the external experts, I already raised some questions. I merely had only questions, but I think the proposals that were discussed today were clearer. They gained in clarity, so that's always good. And I was also happy to see that you did indeed the stand back, like only looking at the requirements. That's important for the clarity, also completeness and enforceability of the requirements. And thank you for that once more. So wish you all the best going forward, and keep up the good work towards the board meeting in December. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janine. So with this, I think that we can wrap up this good meeting, and I think it was really a good meeting. Let me again thank you for the careful review of the documents by the board members, and the good comments provided on both projects that I expect to be very helpful for both the task forces, but to ourselves as a board, to finalize both projects in December with a lot of success. I know that this is not the end of the journey yet, but I'd like to say just one or two words to position ourselves towards the upcoming board meeting. I think that sometimes, and this is absolutely natural, we get a little bit not lost, but stuck in some details. I was listening to Janine saying sometimes the devil is in the details. I don't think that we have a devil here, but sometimes we have details that prevent us from taking the big picture of this. So in those moments, and for those who may be a little bit more perplexed about a few things, I'd like just to bring us back to somewhere in 2022, when we started making decisions with respect to this project, the ambition, the objectives, the purpose, the acknowledgement and the awareness that it was going to be very difficult, it was going to be very challenging, and it was not going to be perfect. We would not meet the perfection that we would strive for, and that at the end, not everybody would be in complete agreement and completely satisfied with the product. This is something that we agreed at this board at the start, and it was with this in mind that we decided to move forward, knowing that this was going to be a very fast train moving in a space that was completely unknown to all of us. So this was the assumption that made us decide to move forward with this project. I think that we went well beyond what our expectations were in terms of quality, in terms of robustness, in terms of how this project made this board grow. And this is something that I will probably conclude next year or whatever, after the board meeting, the December board meeting. But I think that all these are things that we should take into consideration when positioning ourselves to the finalization of this tender. And that there are a lot of incredibly important things and developments and growth, value, etc., that may be for sure much more relevant than some details or some issues that we can consider not to be details, but that in the big picture does not have the value that sometimes we allocate to them. So I needed to say this now and not on the 2nd of December, when probably the minds will be more or less made about how we want to look at this project. I think this will be a journey until then for us to go back, think about everything that has been done, think about our ambitions, our objectives, think about how many times most of us or many of us said, this is incredibly important, this is incredibly urgent. We know that it's going to be extremely difficult, but let's go and let's do the best. I think that we have done more than the best, and I'm very thankful to all those, and some of you in particular, who gave an incredible part of your time, patience, black hair, the hair sometimes, and your nights and days and personal time and etc. to dedicate to this project. I think that it reflects all that and much more, and that we should be satisfied. This does not preclude the efforts and improvements that still have to be made until the very last day. That's what we have been doing. The amount of outreach over the last 2 weeks that we have been undertaking just show that we are still open and wanting to do and to achieve the best product possible. But I believe that we are very, very close, and that we should look at these 2 years behind and where we are coming from and where we are arriving, and try to take the big picture and the value that you want to provide more than any other thing. So this meeting was very important, I think, for that purpose as well. Thank you to the staff who is making a big effort to deliver and offer all these documents, developments, and etc. It's been difficult, it's been hard, it's been challenging, but I think it's been very much worth. And I want to express publicly my gratitude to everyone, but a special word to the staff, which has been very much sacrificed in this process. Thank you very much. I know it's Friday. For some of you, it's already Saturday, I believe. So thank you very much for your time and for extra time during the weekend, and hope to see you very soon. And don't forget that between today, 8th of November, and 2nd of December, there will be a lot of opportunities to connect, to speak, to very informally if necessary, but that's the best way to progress and to overcome any possible remaining issues, doubts, concerns, philosophical doubts, etc. Thank you. Have a very nice weekend. Enjoy, and see you very soon.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank
you.
you.
Everyone, see you.
You.